Pause. What is up? How we doing? NT time, right? Okay, so let me just share this. I accidentally clicked the wrong button, so you know what are you gonna do? Mutaroo. Come on. Okay, so we're talking about NT today. Very exciting. Super pumped. And look, this is my first animal. I'm Savior NT. I'm lead NT. So, obviously, I'm going to get pretty pumped about this. I'm going to try to stay as on topic as possible. But I have a lot to say about it, and I'm hoping that this will be more of an with a little bit more nuance, right, is what I'm sort of going for with this video, just because there are so many goddamn videos out there about like, what is an INTP and what is an INTJ and an ENTP, like the introverted intuitive, and I think NT in general in the Myers-Briggs community is talked about so often and is so well dissected that there's no shortage of research and resources out there about like how to navigate the world as an NT. But that's very much about like navigating the world in an NT savior state, right? So what I really want to focus on in this video, again, as with all of these closer look videos, we're talking about clarity, we're talking about voids. So I want to really, really home in on those two concepts, but I also want to explore the different ways that NT manifests, because it is not just like Mark Zuckerberg nerd shit, right? There are more levels and nuances to it that I think are worth exploring. Whether you have NT higher in your stack, whether you have it lower in your stack, I think that it's very easy to have a monolithic idea of what NT looks like, particularly in this day and age with all of the digital technology. Like NT can kind of get forced into a particular realm or a particular route. And I want to challenge that notion a little bit, just because I think that I know that for myself, I've weirdly always had a really tough time when it comes to identifying strongly with NT. Even though my NI and my TE are my two saviors, I've always felt much more comfortable and much more adept, certainly in the ST realm, unsurprisingly, because it's double activated, but also the SF realm. Like, if you give me the option of having an SF weekend or an NT weekend, I'm gonna pick the SF weekend 100 times out of 100. And honestly, this was pretty true even in my younger years. I certainly appreciated the NT. I spent a lot of time in NT spaces. But man, as I have gotten older, I've really, really moved away from that as like a cornerstone of my identity. And it's something that I think, again, especially in this day and age, especially in the personality community, I think is really worth exploring. And I think it's important to understand the strengths and limitations of NT. And I think it's important to see as many different facets of NT as they play out in the real world. Because as we saw from the thumbnail, like it's not just about match with Mensa. Right? It's not just about solving really complicated programming problems. It's not just about going on to Stack Overflow. It breaks down a little bit more than that in a lot of instances. So what is NT? So NT, we're talking about intuition and we're talking about reasons. So we're talking about patterns. We're talking about possibilities. We're talking about connections. And we are attaching those possibilities and those, plans and those connections, we are attaching them to logic, to reasons, to block banging, to does this work? And the crucial difference between NT and ST, even though they can both get very robotic, they can get a little reportery at times, and a little bit like very by the book. The critical difference with NT is that we're not talking about actual physical reality, right? So, if we're talking about NT as an archetype, I don't actually think that nerd is really the best way to look at it. I see strategist more in the NT realm, right? Now that's got a little bit of NI flavor to it, which again we're gonna get into all the differences. But NT, like an ENTP or an NETE play, like big on brainstorming, big on ideas, big on future possibilities, future options, future avenues, right? Where is this thing going? Where could this thing go in theory? So I'm going to keep saying the phrase in theory a lot in this video, because I think that there's such a cultural weight behind whenever somebody says, well, in theory, it is almost inevitably followed by this will work or this won't work, right? Rarely do we hear, well, yeah, in theory, that could make me feel good. It happens sometimes, but really, culturally, sorry, my allergies are just nuts today. Really, we tend to hear it more in the sense of like, okay, I mean, in theory, that plan could work, but we're not factoring in X, Y, and Z. Or, you know what? God, in theory, this plan should work. Huh. Right? Those are sort of the two ways that we tend to think about in theory, right? Yes, absolutely. In theory, I could go to bed at 10 and wake up at 5:30 every day, right? That will give me 7.5 hours of sleep. To use that as an example, right? What I just said is not talking about actual physical reality, right? I'm not talking about, I haven't factored in the sensory mechanics and the sensory anything sensory about this plan of going to bed at 10 and waking up at 5:30, right? Well, because in theory, that gives me 7.5 hours of sleep. And, that's all the human body needs. You get your 5 REM cycles and you're booping and bopping, right? Yeah, in theory, maybe here's another way to think of NT. There's a phrase that I learned about 10 years ago, and it has stuck with me ever since, and it's called Magical Christmas Land. And in Magical Christmas Land, everything works out perfectly, meaning there's no sensory bullshit to get in the way of these fanciful possibilities. And so you can, so yes, in Magical Christmas Land, I absolutely could fall asleep at 10, wake up at 5:30, do my morning routine, and make it to the gym by 6:30 for this cardio class that I've been trying to fucking take for a while, at least a couple of weeks, and I just can't quite get my ass out of bed to do it, right? And now when I get into the SF side of why this brilliant plan is not as brilliant as I thought, the first issue is that even though I try to go to bed at 10 and I don't often need to, I'm not a late person. And in a lot of ways, in theory, there's nothing prohibiting me from going to bed at 10 and waking up at 5:30. There just isn't. Except for the fact that that means going to sleep at 10:30. How about this? Leave aside the fact that I really need about 8 hours instead of 7.5. I know REM cycle, whatever, but there's a little bit of extra friction in my sleep because I do surface at night. I rarely sleep the entire night fully through. And it also takes me about 20 minutes to really fall into that initial sleep. So all of that little extra friction, like I'm not having 5 perfectly tight NT 90-minute REM cycles, right? So yes, in theory, that's super doable. But if I really want to wake up at 5:30, well, now I got to walk it back, right? Now I got to say, okay, well, I got to be not just in bed at 9:30, right? In bed at 9:30, that's one thing, right? But in bed and like wound the fuck down by 9:30, okay, well then what does that look like? Well then, in order to be wound, like in bed and wound down, that means that I need to really kind of be done with things, right? Anything stimulating me by 9 o'clock, including brushing my teeth, taking a shower, looking at whatever I happen to feel like looking at on the computer before I go to bed, like whatever it is, like that shit's got to be done by 9ish so that I can just get in bed, really power down, and then at 9, by 9:30 start to drift off into sleep, so that by 9:50, 10 o'clock, I've like fallen asleep and begun the sleep cycle. Yeah. Well, now we're talking about stopping, watching TV or cleaning my, like whatever it is at 8:30. Right. Like when you actually walk it back and look at the sensory practicality, there's a lot of shit in there. And also, none of my NT plan factors in value. Like, look, I choose to make a lot of sacrifices. Not a lot, but like, I choose to make social sacrifices because, in the interest of honoring my FI sleep cycle, right? I am fundamentally a morning person. I would take, not only would I be able to just like crush, like first period was always my favorite period at school. Like I fucking loved 8 a.m. first period. I was cranking, like I'm good. And even in college, I was like, what's the earliest class I can sign up for? Oh, great. There's an 8 a.m. class that I can get to. Fantastic. Let me do that and, have, the rest of the day off, right? Or on a day like today, where it's like, all right, let me work out at 8 in the morning, which again means not rolling out of bed at 7:30 and taking an Uber and not being like mentally with it. That means, okay, starting to surface at 6, getting out of bed at 6:30, doing my morning stuff until 6:45, 6:50. It means deciding if I need to fuel myself for the workout or if I'm going to do a fasted workout that particular day. It takes me 25 to 30 minutes to walk to the gym, which I choose to do because I want to, again, wake my body up a little bit before I start the warm up for my actual workout, right? And that, that's a thing that I need to honor about myself, right? But all of this ties into the NT because my plan of, asleep at 10 and wake up at 5, now we're cutting into social time, right? Now we're cutting, now I'm, in order to do that, I'm robbing from the SF part of me. That's like, I'm not ready to, say goodnight to my friends at 8 o'clock at night, right? I'm not ready to say goodnight to them at 8:30 so that I can have me time. No, there's like interesting, exciting things that I want to engage with people about, watch a movie, play some music, whatever it is. That's not going to work for my SF. This NT plan is not going to work for my SF, right? Now, obviously, again, that's a little more function specific, but I use that as an example because NT doesn't give a fuck about the animal brain, right? So archetypally, we can see the opposition of NT and SF, right? We sort of think of like, again, nerds versus cheerleaders, but I think that that's not a terrible place to start the conversation. if you're just starting to try to understand like the goals of each, right? Because NT, it's not again, if we think of like prefrontal cortex versus SF, medulla oblongata, whatever. I'm not a biologist. I literally just know that from the water boy. Don't at me. The NT is so focused on like, well, you'll see, it does the more, right? Like that kind of thing. Whereas the SF, it's like, I don't care about that. I want to like hit, run, fuck, and eat. I don't know why I just took a bite of food. I still have a lot more video to go. This shit is going to take a while to chew. So, I have a terrible idea. See, if I had really been fully into the NT, probably would have seen that and been like, no, don't do the sensory bit, Raja. Just stick to the plan, because the sensory bit's going to throw you off and it's going to fuck up your NT energy. Right? So, all of this is to say, if you start with the really broad strokes of nerd and jock, you're in the realm, right? Or nerd and cheerleader, right? There's that song, High School Never Ends, Bowling for Soup, and there's a whole chunk in the middle where it's like, Reese Witherspoon, she's the prom king, she's the prom queen, Bill Gates, captain of the chess team. That's a really, again, if you're starting from the beginning and you're like, I'm just trying to understand this basic opposition. Reese Witherspoon, save your SF, consume. Bill Gates, save your NT, consume. We viscerally understand that difference, right? But what I want to talk about in each of these is how it can be so much more than that. So I'm going to start with NT Blast because that's what I got. That's what Dave's got. It's what Tai Lopez has. It's what Tony Robbins has. There's a lot of NT in the OP community. So that's what Joe Rogan has. That's what Shannon has, right? So NT Blast, what I'm doing right now. I'm throwing in a little play, and I'm throwing in, a little SF, doing little bits here and there, whatever. But fundamentally, these videos are like nerd talks, right? And they're not particularly emotional, and they're not, like, you're not going to watch these videos to be entertained. Like, maybe you're here for the sweet guns, right? Tickets to the gun show, but like probably not. I'm going to guess that that's not why most of you are here. You are here because you're like, I want to better understand the theory behind objective personality. I want to better understand the abstract concept of binary coins, right? And I want to better understand the abstract concept of clarity and voids and all of those things, right? And that's, when somebody's NT blasting like I'm doing, like Dave does, it's, here's my known information about how shit works, right? You hear Hassan Minhaj talk about this a lot. When he's in an interview and they're asking him about things in life and whatever, he's always like, look, it really comes down to two things. Boom and boom. Because NT Blast wants as narrow a focus as possible when it comes to getting the tribe on board. Because they want the tribe validation. They want the tribe behind them. They want to engage the people. They want to help the people. And in order to do that, they're like, okay, we can't get the whole tribe on board with a bajillion different ideas. Let's narrow down. Let's find one lane that everybody can go into that works for everybody, right? Which is sort of like, again, I don't know who came up with this, but like the concept of a 9-to-5 job, right? The idea of 8 hours for work, 8 hours for sleep, 8 hours of what we will, right? That's a very NT way to go about it. Because it seems, oh, yes, in theory, that works perfectly, right? But in practice, does it? Because you go to work for 8 hours, that's from 9 to 5, right? Well, and again, let's assume they're not dicks. Let's assume they don't do the super shitty thing, which I have so many stabby rage problems about, where it's like, oh, well, the workday is from 9 to 6, and we give you an hour lunch break. No, fuck you. That's a 9-hour day because nobody takes a goddamn hour for lunch. And if they do, they're wasting so much time that could be spent not. Okay, I'm done. I'm done. I have a lot of feelings. I have a lot of feelings about work days and length and just fucking lot. Anyway, well, let's assume it's a normal 9 to 5 and, you know, paid half-hour lunch, right? That's the way. Again, given the parameters, I'm fine with this, right? Well, but it's not really 8 hours of sleep and 8 hours of what you will, because you got to commute, right? You have to get to work, which can take anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour. And if it's if it's an hour-long commute, right? If you're coming in from the suburbs, so now all of a sudden it's like, I have to be at work by 9, so I need to leave by 8, and then I'm not home until 6. Okay, well now now it's either 6 hours for what I will and 8 hours for sleep, or 7 and 7, right? You're robbing from somewhere. And honestly, realistically, you get home at 6, that doesn't even factor in if you have to go to the supermarket, chores you have to do, things to get, right? And so that to me is a very, right, the 888, that to me is a very NT blast way of approaching a problem that doesn't factor in the SF reality of like all of the other things that go into life, right? You're like, okay, well, there's some like Maslow needs that need to be met that aren't getting met because of your slavish insistence on, well, 8, 8, and 8, that's fair. Is it? Is it? Right? So that's NT Blast. And again, if you watch me or Dave or Ty Lopez, all of what we are ever doing is being like narrowing down all of the concepts, just get down to one concept and then just get the tribe on and just make, compelling reason after reason after reason about why this singular point of view is the best one, the right one, whatever, right? NT Play still has that tribe engagement, right? But now we're talking about extra possibilities, right? We are no longer concerned with narrowing down the possibilities. We want to expand the possibilities. We want in any given video to be about as many things as possible as we can cram into a 30-minute video, right? So if you've been watching this series, and if you have not, I encourage you to go back and check out previous videos and, ask questions, engage, love to answer them. In every closer look video, we're always talking about clarity and voids. And every video is about one singular thing most of the time, right? I'll weave around and I'll bring in other things and whatever, but predominantly I don't like start talking about NT and then pivot to masculine sensory, right? That's not what my NITE wants to do. It's like, here is a thing, we're getting the tribe on board. Another really just staggeringly great example to me of NT Blast, and I promise I'll move on to Play, is there's a YouTube channel called Screen Rant. And they have a playlist called Super Easy, Barely an Inconvenience. And it's this guy, Ryan Jord, and he does these little videos where he's like, the premise is, how do these movies get made with all the dumb things in the movie? How did they get approved, right? And so it's like a screenwriter and his dumb studio exec just going back and forth. So if it's like, I'm trying to think of a good, so like Suicide Squad, they did a good one on that. And it's like, all right. And then I'm thinking at the beginning, we're going to have a bunch of different, we're going to put descriptions of all of the different superheroes for like 4 seconds. Won't that be difficult for the audience to follow? Not if they're watching it at home on VHS. Oh, okay, please continue. Right. And you're right. And then the satire is that you're like, oh, wait, that is a dumb decision, but they're really excited about it and getting on board with it. So like, but again, all that is to say, if you watch, he has like 100 videos that just do the same goddamn thing. Like there's no variety in this guy. But he's still, again, very TE, very like getting the tribe on board, whatever. NT Play is someone like Phil DeFranco, where he is really all over the place. Craig Ferguson is another one. Engaging the tribe, very reasons-based, very like abstract idea-ish, like a mad scientist-y kind of. But it's like, this idea reminds me of that, and cereal reminds me of grain, and grain reminds me of a grain-free diet that I have to be on, and dieting makes me think of that Garfield comic, and Garfield comic makes you think of Foxtrot, and you're like, what? How the fuck? What? Again, my NI is like, oh my God, stay in one fucking place. But NE is like, I'm bored. I want to do new things. Like, oh, great, we touched on this idea. Cool, let's see if there's a better one. Ooh, let's see if there's a better one. Ooh, let's see if there's a better one. And it's constantly looking for better and better and better and better ideas. Again, very abstract, very nothing tangible, right? It's not like Essie, which wants the best sunglasses, the best guitar, the best, whatever. And NE will just like take an idea and then throw it out. Take an idea, throw it out. Take an idea, throw it out. And they're just gathering, right? They're just being like, yeah, I don't need to organize this shit. It's like picking apples. He's like, ooh, that's a neat apple. And if they do find something that has like a lot of sensory value, whatever, then they will organize it very, very specifically, right? With their SI. But until that, they're like, this idea. Oh, I like that idea. Let's explore this idea and really find the details and the nuances and the sensory of this cool idea. Oh, okay, cool. Oh, on to the next thing, right? And that's, right, the NESI axis, which can be very playful if it's paired with TE, but it's very, very different from the NT blasting, because I'm like, no, it's very personal to me, this idea, this plan, it's my plan, and I'm getting everybody else on board with my plan. So yeah, let's stick to my plan. Yeah, whatever the details, look, if better details come up, if better data comes up, cool, but like respect the sanctity of my plan. NT Consume, I would say, is probably the most archetypal kind of NT. I think that honestly, in general, TI, when we think of NT, it's a very TI-driven NT, right? We sort of think of like Bill Gates. We think of Sheldon on Big Bang Theory. We think of just your archetypal TI nerd. Right. Bill Gates is a really great example of NT Consume, because all he gives a shit about is new ideas, new possibilities that make sense to him. Right. So his, right, like, figuring out, the toilets or the malaria or the whatever, right? It's all stuff that may or may not work at scale, but in his mind, is like, okay, well, theoretically, yes, the logic blocks bang together and sort of interlock and stack inside my own head. And so now I want to get the tribe on board with the value of my idea that's weird and personal to me, right? He's not trying to get people on board with the block banging, because that would be TE, right? He's not trying to find something that works for everybody. He's trying to find something that works for him, for his inside his headness, right? And again, because there's NT, we got the NE component of that, which is it's very easy for him to get bored of one idea. He doesn't want to run an idea into the ground. He wants to go, I had this idea. Ooh, okay, well, that reminds me of this other idea. And there is like a chaoticness to that, right? And the way that he approaches that. Again, I don't want to dwell too much on NT sleep or NT consume, just because there are a squadrillion examples in the media. You find any nerd archetype and you're like, oh, good, there it is. Boom, done, got it, right? And then NT sleep. I love NT sleep. Love it. Love it. It's weird. I know you're not supposed to play favorites, but like my favorite, as I mentioned before, like my favorite kind of blast is ST Blast. I love NT Sleep. I also like NF Sleep, but I really like NT Sleep and SF Consume. Again, different, whatever. NT Sleep is wild. I think Eminem is a really good example. Eminem is who I would encourage you to look at for Savior NT Sleep. And then, someone like Oprah or Gary Vee. Russell Brand, I think, is another example, a great example of demon NT Sleep, right? So when NT Sleep is cool, you can really see the narrowing of the narrow, right? Where it's extremely intricate and it's not, we're not putting bricks together. We're putting a watch together, right? Which is why ISTPs will have, like, the really introverted ISTPs are going to have a really strong TINI sleep. And they're like, all right, we're narrowing down this one concept, and here's how all the little gears work together, and it's this like intricate machination, whatever, of like my precious little thing that works internally logically for me. Well, and if the tribe doesn't get on board, then they're just too stupid, right? That's the danger of the swing. If you're all in on your NT sleep and somebody doesn't get you, it's not that they're stupid, it's that you didn't SF and engage them in some way other than your weird nerdy head, right? And you can see that with Eminem really strongly, because he's an INFJ missing blast. So he's sleep, consume, play, missing blast, but he's got a ton of energy on his TI and his NI, and you can really see in his raps. If you go to Genius and just look at the rhyme structure, there's a bunch of videos that break down his rhyme structure, and you're like, this is like building a nuclear warhead. The way that he layers in all of the things in a way that really only makes sense to him. He does have the SF play component. He is able to like double masculine get at you and engage the audience. Again, that's why he's been very successful. But he's just all in on his NI and his TI. And I think this is correct, what I'm about to say. So one of the earliest, and I don't like to talk about this guy because he did some very bad things, and I don't like him very much at all. But Elliot Rodger, right, the Isla Vista Massacre guy, I bring him up in the context of NT Sleep because he is one of the main people that got Dave and Shannon to recognize jumpers. Because they kept trying to type this guy when it happened. It's a horrible, horrible tragedy. And all they could get to was like, I'm just seeing a shit ton of NI and a shit ton of TI. Which, again, does not excuse anything. I have an extraordinarily low opinion of him. I don't like him very much at all. But I think that as, an archetype of like, what overdoing NT sleep looks like, and then having like a horrible SF demon swing about it. I think you could make a case for him as being somebody to study and deliberately not emulate. So, again, sort of talking around clarity and voids. I think the void is pretty clear. Of when you're all in on your NT, you're missing the SF void. You're missing there's nothing animalistic about NT. There's nothing visceral about NT. It's very logical. It's very heady. It's very prefrontal cortex, which can be a liability. Because to actually engage people in a meaningful, actionable way, you gotta juice it a little bit with like engage their monkey brain, right? And so, but in terms of clarity, like I sort of think of NT clarity being, oh my God, the ones and the zeros of the universe appear to me. There's a great scene in the Animatrix. If anybody ever watched that, it's from like, oh God, 2001, I want to say. But it's a bunch of shorts that take place within the Matrix universe. And one of them is called, I want to find it because it's a really good example of NT clarity. Animatrix. All right, 2003, so later than I thought. So it's called World Record. It's really good. And there is a moment in World Record where it has this like moment of NT clarity. I don't want to give it away because it's so powerful, but that moment to me is like, oh, yes, cool. I now understand SF versus NT, right? And it really is the clarity of like, or I guess, how about this one? Heaven on Their Minds, Jesus Christ Superstar. My mind is clearer now. At last, all too well, I can see where we all soon will be. Right? That's a very like, oh my God. It's existential clarity, but it's attached to logic. It's like I see the logical building blocks of the universe, not the NF clarity of, oh my God, I see the value in all things, man. No, it's, oh my God, we're in a computer program. I see the wire. I see the matrix, right? It's that kind of a thing. So if you are feeling like you have too much of that NT clarity, how about this? How about that painful Doctor Who quotation? To see absolute truth requires two essential qualities. You must be brilliant and unloved. Which I don't entirely agree with. But what that's getting at is this idea of NT clarity is absent sensory, which again in the Doctor Who universe, it's very NT driven. It's very anti-sensory. You must be brilliant, aka strong N. Right? Strong intuition, strong cleverness, NE in particular, and unloved in the sense of dominant on N and lacking F. So that to me is like, what can happen when if you have too much NT clarity, look for love, ground yourself in reality, find something physically meaningful, anything that is meaningful to you, or to to the people around you, whatever, in physical reality. And again, I think that starting with SF sleep, if you're trying to learn SF, regardless of what your animal stack looks like, I reference SIFI sleep a lot if I'm trying to grow my SF. If it's like, okay, I have too much NT clarity, I don't like it. What's a physical object that I value? Okay, let's start there. Let's just warm up the muscle pattern of, SF appreciating something in physical reality. And then you can go to whatever function, animal, whatever you're trying to work on. But starting with that, start with that. And then from there, you can actually work on the thing you need to work on. And if you don't have enough NT, I'm going to say there's not a huge shortage of archetypes to look at for NT. Again, Doctor Who is a really good one. Anything in nerd culture, Tony Stark, watching the Marvel movies. But really sort of, you know, if you have SF, then you are so in your body, grounded, sensory, physical. It's extraordinary. Never stop doing that. And I would challenge you to say, okay, let's see if there are a couple of building blocks that we can start to see within this, right? Let's see if we can sort of see the matrix of this very physical act, this very visceral, emotional, sensory, animalistic mode that I'm in. Let's see if we can attach a pattern to that. All right. That's all I got for today. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for playing along. As always, be sure to like and subscribe. And we got 2 more of these closer look. We got the masculine sensory and the feminine sensory, and then we're on to new stuff. So thank you for hanging out with me, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye. Oh.